Why vision is the first thing your body sacrifices to stay alive. To understand why the body sacrifices vision first, you need to understand a number most people have never heard of: perfusion pressure, the force required to actually push blood into a tissue against the resistance already inside it. Most organs in the body have relatively low internal resistance to work against. The eye does not. The eyeball is a sealed, pressurized chamber. Intraocular pressure, the fluid pressure inside the eye itself, sits at roughly 15 millimeters of mercury at rest, even when you're perfectly healthy. Blood doesn't just need to reach the eye. It needs to reach the eye with enough force to overcome that internal pressure and actually perfuse the retina sitting behind it. This single architectural detail is what makes vision the most pressure-sensitive sense in the human body. And it's why, across three completely different emergencies, fainting, high-speed flight, and blood loss, the eyes fail in exactly the same order. First, every time. The most common version of this plays out in ordinary life, millions of times a day, and almost nobody recognizes it for what it actually is. Stand up too quickly, skip a meal, feel a sudden wave of fear or pain, or the sight of blood. The vagus nerve fires, heart rate drops, blood vessels in the lower body dilate suddenly. Blood pressure collapses, sometimes by half, within seconds. The body's emergency response is automatic and ruthless. Blood pressure to the brain takes priority over everything else. But before that priority can fully take effect, there's a gap, a brief window where perfusion pressure to the eye drops below the threshold the retina needs to function, before the brain itself is critically affected. The result is something almost everyone has experienced at least once: the edges of vision dimming first, color draining from the periphery inward, a narrowing tunnel of gray, then a tunnel of black, while you can often still hear, still think, still technically stand. Doctors call this presyncope. Most people just call it going woozy and forget about it within the hour. What actually happened is that the eyes lost adequate blood pressure before the brain did. A small, completely survivable demonstration of a much larger system. Fighter pilots experience the exact same mechanism in its most extreme and most thoroughly studied form. During a high-speed turn, gravitational force pulls blood downward, away from the head, toward the legs and lower body. The heart has to pump against that force just to maintain adequate pressure at eye level. At around 4 to 4.5 G, sustained for even a few seconds, pilots experience what aviation medicine calls grey out. Peripheral vision desaturates. Color disappears first, starting at the outer edges and closing inward. Push past that, closer to 5G, and pilots experience blackout. Complete loss of vision. And this is the detail that surprises almost everyone outside aviation medicine. Blackout is not unconsciousness. The pilot is still fully awake, still thinking clearly, still flying the aircraft by feel and memory and instrument touch, completely blind for several seconds at a time. If the G-force continues beyond that threshold, the brain itself finally loses adequate perfusion. The pilot loses consciousness entirely, sometimes for 10 to 15 seconds, during which a multi-million-dollar aircraft is, for all practical purposes, unmanned. Grey out, then blackout, then full unconsciousness, always in that exact order. This is precisely why modern pilots wear G-suits, which mechanically compress the legs and abdomen to fight blood from pooling away from the head. And why they train in the anti-G straining maneuver, a specific full-body muscle contraction that buys the eyes, and then the brain, a few extra critical seconds. The eyes go first, every single time. The hardware and the training exist because of that exact order. The same hierarchy shows up in trauma medicine, in a context with much higher stakes. As blood volume drops from significant hemorrhage, systemic blood pressure begins to fall throughout the body. And among the earliest reported symptoms, before confusion sets in, before any loss of consciousness, is exactly the same visual disturbance. Tunnel vision, dimming at the edges, a patient who can still speak clearly, still answer questions accurately, describing a narrowing field of view. Trauma teams are trained to treat this as a serious warning sign rather than a minor complaint. It is one of the earliest visible signals that perfusion throughout the body has started to fail, showing up in the eyes before it shows up almost anywhere else a clinician can observe from outside the body. The retina, in this sense, functions as an early warning system, not because the brain has deliberately chosen to sacrifice it first, because of where it sits, architecturally, right at the edge of what the circulatory system can reliably reach under pressure. This is the detail that separates vision loss from the kind of sacrifice the body makes in cold exposure, where fingers and toes are deliberately starved of blood to protect the body's core. The eye isn't peripheral tissue in that sense at all. The ophthalmic artery branches directly off the internal carotid, the exact same vessel that supplies the brain. Structurally, the eye is an extension of the central nervous system itself, wired directly into the brain's own blood supply. It isn't being deliberately cut off the way a fingertip is. It's failing first because it is physically the single most pressure-demanding tissue the circulatory system has to serve. A sealed, fluid-pressurized chamber sitting at the very top of the body, fed by vessels fighting gravity and internal resistance simultaneously, every second, just to keep you seeing. Every person who has ever stood up too fast and watched a room go grey at the edges has experienced, in miniature, the exact same biological event recorded in fighter jets pulling 9G and in trauma bays during active hemorrhage. It isn't a malfunction. It's one of the most consistent, most predictable thresholds in human physiology. The precise moment perfusion pressure drops just low enough for the most demanding tissue in the body to lose the fight first. Your eyes are not the last thing your body protects. They are very often the first thing it lets go, so that everything behind them can keep fighting a little longer. Almost everyone has felt their vision tunnel and grey for a second before nearly fainting. And it turns out that's the exact same mechanism that makes fighter pilots go blind at high G. Had you ever connected those two experiences before?